And I want to welcome Tony Plesko, the chair of the Urban Design Committee. Thanks for being with us today, everyone.
Right.
Tony?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Wanted to welcome you all to our third event in this year's or this season's series of the Urban Design Committee's talks. And we are really excited to have Gabrielle Bullock and some of her colleagues from Perkins & Will with us this evening. The focus is really a conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion within the design community, and as an aspect of our approach to design, and the sort of the project around which this, the focus of which or an opportunity to sort of discuss this with respect to a specific project will be the Destination Crenshaw, which Perkins & Will is the primary designer of. We're doing this, the presentation will basically constitute two parts. Gabrielle will present, will make a presentation, and then it'll be followed by some breakout sessions. And those will be run by some of her colleagues. And I'd like to mention to you who those are. Drake Dillard, who's with Perkins & Will, is the project manager, or was the project manager for Destination Crenshaw. Jorge Mutas was the project designer and is also with Perkins & Will. And then Martin Leitner, who's an urban designer with PW. Everyone is in the Perkins & Will LA office. So they're all local folk. And then there'll be 4 breakout rooms. The fourth chair, if you will, or organizer of that will be Joshua Foster, who's the chair of the AIA LA JEDI Committee and works at KFA. So that's the basic structure of this evening's talk. But first, I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Bullock. Again, extremely excited to have her here this evening. Gabrielle is a principal at the LA Perkins & Will office, and she's the director of Perkins & Will Global Diversity Initiative. And she's also a fellow at the AIA. And more importantly, she's a fellow New Yorker. So that has real meaning for me. So, and she sounds like one too, which is good. Anyway, Gabrielle, let me hand the mic to you, and so we don't lose any time on what promises to be a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I don't have the Valley Girl talk, so yeah, I probably will still sound like a New Yorker.
There you go.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I guess you'd rather watch me than the debate, or you're recording it like I am. So let's get started. Can you all hear me? Okay, I guess that's yes. So as Tony said, so we're going to use Destination Crenshaw as a vehicle by which we're going to explore how do we meet basically equity in design, and how can we meet the needs of communities of color, and in this case specifically a Black community. How can we challenge the status quo and champion equity, equitable design? Oh, okay. So this is Perkins & Will's diversity statement mission, and that we established about 7 years ago. It's very poignant today. This is our philosophy, both in our culture and the work that we do. So we are committed to building a culture of inclusion, diversity, and equity, establishing it as a core value, which we are, I think we're there, and building the pipeline, which is key to advancing and making sure that our future, the future architects and designers represent the communities that we serve. And then finally, we are committed to helping to lead the profession at large toward a more just, equitable, and diverse, inclusive profession. Recently, we focused on JEDI. Previously, when we initiated this effort, this focus, it was diversity and inclusion. But given what we've all been through for the last 6 months, we are putting a particular emphasis on justice and equity. And so we are keen on challenging the status quo in practice and culture to tear down those barriers and build a more just and equitable society. And so why now? Equity and community, you know, we're experiencing some call it a triple pandemic. Clearly it's a triple crisis, the health crisis that is of the pandemic that is impacting disproportionately communities of color, the environmental crisis, the economic crisis, and the racial and social justice crisis. Now, I'm sure many of you have had these conversations over the last couple of months, and I get, you know, asked frequently, you know, Black Lives Matter, well, don't all lives matter? And why are we focusing on only the Black community? So I like this example. So there's a community, right? Neighborhood of 9 houses. But if only one's on fire, why would you douse all the other houses? So we are in crisis in many of our communities of color, from disinvestment, years and years, decades of disinvestment. And now the focus is on how to repair that, how to move forward with a more equitable approach to all communities, but in this case, specifically communities of color that have been highlighted in the last 6 months for sure, as how we see how it shows up. In any part of society that's broken, the entire society is broken. So if we look at, you know, what is social equity, right? If all of the barriers within these systems, right? Environmental protection, economic development, equity, and social justice all impact the very notion of sustainability and resiliency. And I don't mean that in the sustainability, you know, green, I mean sustainability of community, of society, and resilience of society. So in each of these societal realms, we have the opportunity to challenge the status quo. Where are the practices and the policies within the built environment that are preventing equitable access to all of this? So I like to think that if we designed with cultural competency in mind, that we could go beyond doing no harm, we could do a lot of good. And I do think that, you know, I don't think we're down here where we're culturally defective, where people actively belittle our cultures. Oh, I see a typo down here, sorry about that. But if we, you know, strive to become culturally competent at the highest level, where people unconsciously hold culture in the highest esteem and use it to guide their lives and their work, if we did that as designers and urban planners, we could help right the wrongs. Just some ideas. And then to challenge the status quo, how do we go from this is the way we've always done it to a more equitable, a more just approach, to the Jedi approach? Well, I think we have to challenge everything we do, challenge the status quo. And in terms of design, for instance, you know, most of us of my age were taught in a very Eurocentric Western way, through one lens, both through aesthetics and the process. And so what if we didn't have, you know, a preconceived notion of that, and that we designed with ethnically and culturally curious and competent? And there's plenty others. And in your spare time, you can make your own list about what you think, what we do today, how we design today, how we design for communities today, how our practices are run today. What should change to make it more equitable and diverse and inclusive? So now we get to Destination Crenshaw, which I think is talks about and demonstrates some of these concepts about how to design a more equitable community. And it, you know, we have the usual urban design themes, streets, nodes, themes, connective tissue. All you urban designers are familiar with those terms. So Destination Crenshaw, for those of you who don't know, I understand there's some people across the country here, is in South LA on Crenshaw Boulevard. And it was, the reason for this project is actually precipitated by a larger infrastructure project, the expansion of the Metro rail line from the airport, LAX, down at the bottom here, up to Leimert Park to the north. And so through the Crenshaw district, which is a major commercial area within the Black community in South LA, the train goes at grade. Now, in most major commercial areas in Los Angeles, the train would go below grade or above grade. In this 1.3 mile stretch in the heart of this community, it's at grade. So the community tried to persuade Metro to not do that, to do it below grade or above grade, but they were unsuccessful. So the community, this is the community's project. They proposed it through their council members. So this is a community initiated project. And the project is, well, let me get to something else. So Crenshaw Boulevard, this is Crenshaw Boulevard. And when the Endeavor came through to be located at the Science Center, Crenshaw Boulevard was the decided route, whether because of width, it is quite a wide street, but they took down all the trees to get it there. And they have not been replaced. They will be replaced as part of this project. So when we talk about impact of communities of color, the disinvestment, some of the damage that's done, this is part of what we're dealing with. So the site plan or the big ground, so this is north is to your right, south is to your left. This orange is the train stop. So it's coming from LAX, it comes up at grade, it stops here, and then it runs along until it goes below grade at Leimert Park. It's 1.3 miles, Crenshaw Boulevard with all the major cross streets. Project is an outdoor art and cultural experience for that 1.3 miles. It is not meant to save a community, create a community. It's to celebrate a community and to strengthen the community. The community already existed. And so we are leveraging its existing assets, create a unique experience and catalyzing growth. That's very important, the economic growth that this project will provide. And to me, those are some of the key pieces of providing an equitable approach to design, that we're not coming in as saviors. We're not tearing down everything and starting new. We're taking what's there and we're learning from that. Another key point and success and element to equitable design is the community as a co-design partner. The people you see in these pictures are the bulk of the community design team that has been with this project from the very beginning and will be there till the end. They're still engaged in every step of the way. And I can go into more detail. So now to the heart of the project. So we researched, the project, the community, the migration of African Americans to Los Angeles from the South and from the East. And after doing a lot of research on the history and the current, community, we decided to look at the term root shock from Mindy Fullalove's book, Root Shock. And it really talks about how communities, in this case, how Black LA has established a strong interconnected community and well-rooted and thriving. And despite, root shock, things that happen in the community, the community has remained strong. And so we liken it to the rhizome grass, which I'll share with you in a little bit, but it has no single origin or genesis, no beginning or end, and it's an organic network that sprouts through the surface. And this grass in the US is like Bermuda grass. But this grass we found it to be particularly metaphoric because it was the bedding for slave ships. And bedding for slave ships, you can't kill this thing. If you have Bermuda grass in your yard, you're never going to kill it, right? So it's strong, it's resilient. Actually, the roots are horizontal, as you can see here. This is very important because you'll see why. And so root shock and grow where you're planted. You're firm, and you're gonna prosper with the investment of time and money. And so if you look at this overlay on the site plan, doesn't it look like a root system? It's supposed to. And so we were using that metaphor throughout, and the project is organized in nodes to interpret the experience. And these nodes are at 4 major intersections that would encompass pocket parks, art, exhibit design, landscape, all responding to themes and stories related to each node. So for improvisation, for instance, at Slauson at the south end, it celebrates resourcefulness and the positive outcome of struggles, right? So speaking to the strengths of this community. First, at 54th Street, celebrates the first person stories of significant moments in historical firsts that impacted the political, local, and international. And this is not a chronological museum. We're not going decade by decade. That was very intentional. Dreams at 50th Street will celebrate the realm of dreams, the seemingly impossible, and the aspirations, hope. And then finally, at the end, at 46th Street, it's called togetherness. So that's where you celebrate resilience and the culture born out of togetherness, both historical and current. So that speaks to the gathering. So there are a series of pocket parks, which are, we have commandeered a couple of parking spaces, some private lots that we have gotten access to. And so they're just interventions along the way where you'd have different themes, and the landscape and the seating and the art will all, as I said, relate to the theme of that area. So there's 10 pocket parks. I think we're at about 8 large permanent art installations, 50+ murals, and all of the stories that will be told are unapologetically Black. And that is the client and the community's desire, unapologetically Black stories. All the artists are African-American. They all have some connection to LA and beyond. Many of them are internationally known artists. I can't tell you who they are though, not yet. They haven't been revealed, but they're fabulous. So they are, so that is the idea. And the idea is that you can walk down Crenshaw Boulevard, peel off to a park. Now in August, nobody's gonna walk this 1.3 miles straight, right? So the idea was that the design ought to, if you can only go a block, then you'll have an experience. Maybe the next day you go another block, or you go from the other end. So you don't have to walk the entire mile to get the experience. And so this is one of the first parks. It's called the Welcome Park. And then when you get off the train, this is the park that you would see. And this is a park that's created right outside of a shopping center. There's a Burger King just to the left, and there's a supermarket way in the back. And so this is the two sculptures that are meant to be speaking to each other. This is a place to sit and relax and talk and chat. I'll talk a little bit about the shade structures. As you can see, they sort of are reminiscent of the 4 strands of the Bermuda grass, the rhizome, and then on the pavement, all along the boulevard that occurs. And this is from up top. You can see the exhibit panels on the light pole. Everything will be, all the graphics will be, we will engage artists, local graphic artists, to help with the color and the imagery. Across from the other side, from the train stop, there is what we call the, well, it's fire station. We call it the, oh, Don, what do we call this? The, somebody help me out, Jorge, I forgot.
This is the monument at the fire station.
No, but we call this rooms, anyway, okay, fine. So this is the monument at an old, this is the historic fire station with a parking lot next to it. And so we're gonna take the apparatus bay where the old fire truck would go through, turn it into a visitor center. But this right here, the monument, is really meant to be a beacon and a marker for Destination Crenshaw. So this is 120 feet tall, 160 feet tall. So it's pretty tall. We will engage a lighting designer, an artist, to help with that. And you can see back here, say it loud. So this is in the improvisation node. So there's likely to be spoken word, dance, concerts perhaps in this park. And then all along you have, this is Park of Play. So there's place for kids to climb. There's another climbing sculpture. And I'm just gonna breeze through, you can get the sense. All of the artwork was curated with the Artist Advisory Council as part of the team. The artists submitted their proposed work, and with the Advisory Council, we determined which artist was most appropriate and which park their work would best fit. Not fit, you know, size-wise, but fit thematically. This is one next to a senior housing. So any wall that we can get permission to put a mural on, we will. In the sidewalk, there's murals. There's a blank wall here. There will be a mural. This wall is the one that you saw with the Endeavor going down the boulevard. This wall was started in the 70s by citizens. It was a grassroots effort, and it's been maintained and changed over the years by citizens. So as part of this project, we will restore it, engage other artists, and add a stair and a little park above it, so forth. And this park is across the street from the wall. You know, you couldn't see the wall unless you were right next to it. Crenshaw Boulevard is pretty wide, and so you never really could get a sense of it if we didn't have an elevated platform to view it. So that's partly why that's there. And that's it from above. More artwork. At the Crenshaw High School, there was, either this was a fence or we're adding a wall, or the wall was there, I can't quite remember, but there will be a commissioned mural at this location as well. And so what's going to tie all of this together? You know, the rhizome and the Bermuda grass, that's really the theme for the connective tissue. So in the pavement, I'll start over here, there's a different color. I think we changed from brass. It was a problem for the city. But so there's the pavement will mimic the root system It only goes in one direction. You'll never find these going in the other direction. The shade structure is meant to mimic the same. These are no longer yellow. We proposed yellow. There was some discussion, and I believe it was the community that felt strongly that they didn't like the yellow, so we changed the yellow of the shade structures and the benches. Similarly with the exhibit design panels, so those will be, you know, marked along at each park to tell the story. There'll be a digital component to this whole program. And you can see how the connective tissue really helps to stitch the whole thing together. So even when there's not a pocket park, you still have the pavement and the mosaics and the art in the pavement marching down the boulevard. Similarly with the landscape. So all those trees are coming back. And then we get to the last park, which is Sankofa Park. And it's just at Lemert Park, which is up here. The train now goes underground. So right in here is where we've redirected some of the traffic. We put in new crosswalks and created the park, Sankofa Park, which will house at least 5 or 6 major pieces of artwork, sculpture. And it's the name Sankofa is an African symbol in term that literally means go back and get what was taken. And, you know, remembering our past to protect our future. And it's when up here, so if you're at the top of the ramp, then you sort of switch back and you look to where you were. That's that idea. And it's really meant to be a gathering place for all kinds of events, protests, anything, music, spoken word. The underside of the ramp will be an artist opportunity for etchings of, and we plan on having the historical figures, well, not only historical, but main figures, portraits etched into the surface underneath. Nipsey Hussle, Tupac, Biddy Mason, and others. And so you could see any opportunity to tell the story. Quote, these are also donor opportunities. What am I missing? And that's this art piece of the car culture. On Sundays is when the lowriders would ride down Crenshaw. So this sculpture piece is homage to that, to the car culture in LA. And I believe the chassis will be lit up. Great selfie opportunities. And so notice anything different? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So this is the team. And most of the team in this picture is the community. You can see Drake there, you can see Martin in the center, Jorge is somewhere in here. I, as an African-American architect, female architect, have never until this project had a client that looked like me. And I can't tell you how proud both the client and the team is. I do want to mention the other members of the team, MLA Studio, KPFF, both structural and civil, Cisca for MEP, and RAW actually was part of the early design phase. So that is our team. And now we get to the questions. And these are the questions that you're going to ask, you're going to deal with in the breakout session. And I'm not organizing the breakout session. I'm just going to roll out the questions. So what does equitable design mean? And there are some thoughts down here. These are not the only ones, but build respect in neighborhoods. There's a difference between good and doing good and doing right. Doing good means we're doing good for us. Doing right means doing right for others. Third, cultural competency representation is what leads to a responsive design. And design informed by the community's needs and desires in challenging the inequitable planning process that may exist. And I think you can see how the design process change can achieve equitable design, right? This project is the epitome of a client community-led design process and ultimately the outcomes. And I think what we're really hoping to do, and our goal was to avoid cultural erasure and displacement and negative gentrification through this process and through the design, strengthen the community, and embed its legacy, stories, and values. We think it promotes pride, stewardship, and ownership, and then catalyze economic growth. And that is what I have. Questions? How'd I do? Right on time.
Yeah, all good.
Who's
Thanks,
kicking
Gabby.
off these breakout sessions?
Thanks, Gabrielle. So Tibby, I think we've got, so the goal now, yeah, I mean, we are going to break out into these sessions now. There'll be 4, and you will be redirected shortly. You'll see it on your screen that you'll, a little window, and it'll say being redirected into a breakout room, and then you'll meet up and you guys can chat and discuss a lot of these ideas that were posited by Gabrielle in her presentation for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll get back together and we'll continue that discussion and deal with questions. We do encourage, and you could please use the chat room if you like, if you have questions to enter those into the chat room, and then we'll be able to address a bunch of those after the breakout sessions are complete. Okay? Tibby, you good?
Yep, I'm good. So hopefully I'm
Okay,
good.
great.
I've got Steve as my backup. I think actually, I don't know if we're able to transfer the chat from the breakout sessions to the main room. So if you have questions for Gabrielle directly or that you want to talk to the main body with, keep those and bring them back into the chat when we return you to the
Okay.
chat. So I'm gonna start putting people in breakout sessions. Everyone's gonna have a facilitator with them. I'll put them in first, and then God willing, you will all slowly start migrating into the breakout sessions. All right. Just give me 1 minute, like keep chat amongst yourselves.
I'm going to do the design process change to achieve ED.
Jake, I've sent you to your chat room. You should get a notice. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All of you guys have your chat. Except for Josh, there you go. Okay.
And I am Jorge. I'll be talking about the Jedi lens and the impact that it has on the community.
Okay. Jorge, you should have been moved to your chat room. Do you need to, Steve, can you tell Jorge how to technically, I know you did it the other day in rehearsal, but I have moved you to your chat room.
I don't see
You
anything
caught
on me
me.
as well.
I don't.
You
I'm
you
still
caught me
here.
on the one thing I'm not so well versed at.
If you guys scroll to the bottom of your screen, there should be a breakout room icon. And then you can click on that.
It's not enabled for me. I think it's only enabled for Tibby.
I don't see anything at the bottom.
Okay, so everyone has been assigned, and it looks like people are moving into their chat rooms.
Oh.
Let's see. For Jose, hey Mario, why
Yes.
are we still having people
Did
who are out here? Oh,
After you assign them, you have to send
there
them.
you go. I hit open all rooms. I get it. There you go.
Now it's
that was my
happening.
bad. Sorry, everyone.
The extra step. I always forget that.
So it should be, yep, we
Yeah,
are
Tibby,
the
you
only
can-
one. Oh, Casey, I need to assign you to a chat room. How come I can't? Casey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see. I'm assigning you to room 4 now. Okay?
Okay.
You should be able to enter.
You're still missing John Bechtel.
Yeah, but he is not. John? He's in a waiting room. He's not showing up as an unassigned person. Hey, John, can you hear me? Unmute yourself. John, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself? John? Yeah, he's not showing up as an unassigned person. Okay.
Are we able to just add him? And Tibby, do you want to pause recording while we're? I should have caught that.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we could potentially do is speak to the moderators from the break rooms and see if there were any questions that emerged from those conversations. So I sat in with Jorge. It was a very interesting conversation and happening in his group. But maybe we could hear from Joshua and Drake and Martin and Jorge for the benefit of others and see what might have emerged from that discussion. And then that will, presumably that'll lead sort of into a group of questions. So who would like to start? Joshua?
Yeah, sure. I can get started. Thankfully, Gabrielle hopped in right when we had our hard-hitting questions, so she was able to answer some of those for us. But I guess I'll give a little bit of a recap on some of the topics we were able to go over. And so when we started off, just asking and posing the question of what equitable design meant to each of us, and what exactly did we take out of the presentation for that. We started off thinking about the idea of doing good versus doing right, which Gabrielle talked about, and then the thought of what is good for the city as a whole isn't always right for the community that you're actually building in, and that equal isn't always supposed to mean take what looks nice in one area and do that same exact thing in another area. The idea of equity should be more so to put in the same process and the same effort into learning what a specific community means and what they need into account when designing in each different community. And so that could mean getting the community organizations involved from the beginning, because no matter how much research we put in as designers and architects and developers, you're never going to know as much about that community than those who live there every day and that are dealing with the ins and outs of what's going on there every single day. So that's a really important part to equitable design. And so the idea of what they're doing with Destination Crenshaw is that with the community being so involved, it's hopefully going to give them the pride and the ownership to a whole nother level that will automatically combat the idea of gentrification, because it's not someone else coming in and imposing what they want on a community. It's the community's thoughts, ideas, and their identity being put back out for everyone to be able to see who they are. And so being able to do that is really important in the idea of equitable design as a whole.
That's great, Joshua. Can we hear from Martin? Where's Martin? It's on a different page somewhere. There you go.
Honey, come on,
Upper right
we're on the
corner.
same page. Good.
So to speak, right.
We had a really good conversation. We actually had Michael in our team who knows the community well and some of the backstory. So that we had a really good conversation. I wrote down a few kind of high points, hoping to do my best to capture all of the good things we spoke about. But we did talk a bit about the disruptive potential of a big infrastructure project in a community, and the examples we all know of the negative effects, and also how different solutions are implemented in different communities tell us how we value those communities, right? And that's very apparent to people that if you do this in this community and that in that community, well, you're really making a value statement through that. We talked about the importance of language and the language you use. Talked about the need to make new precedents. We need to make new precedents that show different approaches, different outcomes. At the same time, we also have to recognize that communities of color have models in particular for sustainability that work. And we really should be looking there when we're looking at precedents. I think in general, we also talked about just stations and how they do bring opportunity and economic opportunity and activity and the importance of activity. And I think close it all off, when we think about our role as designers, planners, architects, really reflecting on how we see that, what our actions are, what our motivations are we designing for people? Because that's probably what we should be doing.
Thanks, Martin. That's great. Drake, can we hear from you? Drake, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, we, again, like everyone else, we had some, I think, really, really good, frank discussion. We looked at the topic of how does the design process change to achieve ED. And I think, we went through that and we went through and talked about community engagement and how did we, Perkins & Will, what was our design process? What did we go through? But I think what was really good that came from all this conversation was actually the direction of what can we do from a code perspective in our design process to in a way force people to go through these changes to make it a better process. So there was some discussion around like using the living bill challenge as an example, but coming up with a process where designers will actually look at this from a policy point of view and direct designers to do this, not in terms of volunteering to do this, but also do it as part of being a professional architect. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting approach, which I had not thought about. But again, the idea was that we do this on sustainability, we do it on other things, and maybe this is something we could do for this as well. So I will leave it there.
That's very interesting. Well, we'll have to pick up on that.
Yeah.
And so lastly, Jorge.
Yes, we focus a little bit on the impact of the Jedi lens, and some of the questions that we talked about were in regards to preservation, the preservation of the existing aesthetic quality culture primarily, and how Destination Crenshaw managed and tried to do that. And so, again, the main focus was that we didn't design to the community, that the project was designed with the community from the very beginning. And that kind of leads into another question that we have, which is our team is very diverse, and not everybody from the team is from the community. Myself point in case. So one of the questions was, when we design and we work in communities where we're not necessarily representatives of that particular culture, how do we approach that? And so one of the challenges that we had in our team was to find ways to educate ourselves and to really take it upon ourselves to try to understand as much as possible. And there was of course that learning curve, and listening to the community. And then one of the last questions that we talked about was in regards to the growth. How did the design of the museum plan for the growth? So how do you look at that future impact? And so we looked at that from the lens of the organic growth of the art evolution, and also ideas that you guys already talked about for investing from within.
Great, that's great. Thank you, Jorge, and thanks to all the moderators. We'd like to open it up, and I haven't seen. Oh, we do have one question, but it was from Diane to everyone. The question was, policy changes always take time, though. What are some things we should be doing for immediate impact as individuals, companies, etc.? Who would like to address that? Drake, would you pick that up maybe? Because it sounds to me you were discussing policy in your breakout.
Yeah. Well, I think from a design point of view, I think that's what the question is around. It always helped, I think, and this is nothing new, but I think it always helped to be involved in communities, actually, before you have a project. One of the discussions we had in our group was, sometimes when you design things, you have to go to a community to get them to review your project, and that might be your first time going there. And one of the things we talked about is that that should not be the situation. You should really, prior to presenting to the community, you should have done your homework and your intelligence is what I call it, and to understand the community, even prior to designing. I think a traditional way of designing it is you get your program, and then you go in your room with your fellow office mates and you design. But I think we're moving away from that, where we had to just be more involved in communities, before we actually go to them. So so that's what I would suggest, I guess.
Thank you, Drake. I have a question for anyone here that wants to have a conversation about it, and that's cultural erasure. And this notion, which is, I mean, it's a very provocative term, and it's kind of, there's a certain ominous nature to what it implies. And I was wondering if, I know Jorge had discussed it in conversation before, and I feel like that's a really critical issue, is like, how do we redevelop communities and somehow not lose sort of the fundamental qualities within that. And I know obviously this has sort of been the point of today's conversation, but can we discuss cultural erasure as either something to avoid or something that has ultimately been a policy strategy in the past? And what is it, you know, and how, and what are the forces behind it?
You know, can I say something real quick? Because I know we have a lot of people going to talk about this, but this is something that I like to tell students a lot because it kind of deals with cultural erasure. And I think people do it unknowingly, but a lot of times as architects, one of the first things, well, the last things we do is we create renderings. And those renderings are our image of our buildings, our projects, but it's also image to the community of what we envision this to be. And so often, particularly recently, you'll find renderings and being presented to communities that, like a Crenshaw, which is basically African American, and on the rendering, because the rendering was most likely done by maybe an intern, but they're pretty much all white people, or they might be one Black or two. And I think, you know, it's maybe unknowingly, but it begins that process of erasure unknowingly. And that's something that I think we can easily change. We have to be sensitive to the images that we project in our projects.
Could I,
thanks, Trey.
Could I add to that? I think instead of thinking about how to not erase culture, why don't we start with, I want to know everything about the culture of where I'm designing. You know, and I use the example of the projects I've done in Saudi Arabia. I don't know anything about Saudi Arabia except for what I read. So how do you become culturally competent if you're not representing that community physically, right? The only way to understand is to ask questions and to research and to get as much knowledge as you can. And why we would start a project without doing that first, that's the problem.
I would also like to share. I mean, Gabrielle, that was exactly what my challenge in Destination Crenshaw. Absolutely. But one of the things that, as a personal discovery aspect, I would share to Tony's question, and it is that oftentimes architecture happens in a silo between you and the client. The project goes through an entitlement process. Perhaps the community gets a slight opportunity to comment, but rarely does the community have a say in it. And so balancing that act in persuading our clients to find the benefit or of allowing communities to have a say in a specific project is a really complicated challenge, but one I think that if successfully enabled, could start to allow for new development to preserve existing cultural qualities.
I mean, it sounds to me like, I'm dealing with a project that's got has a massive entitlement process, and it's an unusual one. It seems to me that maybe it's incorporated into the entitlement process, like it begins to be a part of the political kind of landscape and embedded in the entitlement process, where you simply don't steamroll through. Right. But there's an inclusivity. Anyway, that's I'm not here to do there's a lot of people here I'm sure have opinions on this. Can I ask for other thoughts on that? Because this is, I think, important to everyone.
I had thought of something. You know, I'm a resident of Inglewood, you know, where they built the SoFi Stadium. Maybe Um, but I know that all the time that they were trying to add the stadium to the other part of the development that was already under construction, a lot of the people in the community were thinking about gentrification. Were not trustworthy of the developers. It is just kind of an inherent fear that when money comes into their community, that it won't be their community anymore. So, I don't know. I don't know how, if you're not part of the community, how do you build trust with the community? I guess that's kind of the thing I was thinking about.
No, I mean, excellent point. I don't know. I mean, maybe you follow the Perkins will process, right? See, you know, lessons learned. How do you take this? I mean, I mean, the interesting thing about Destination Crenshaw to me is that it's now a destination, right? If I hadn't gone there before, I'm absolutely going there now. And is that welcome? I mean, is that, you know what I mean? How do you not gentrify? How do you fight off exactly what you hope won't happen through this process? And I know, you know, Gabrielle talked about vetting developers and there being a certain amount of say, but that takes a lot of political spine, right, to make something like that happen, right? So, and we see a lot of spinelessness. So, and greed. So are you guys worried that you ultimately become a victim of something that you have worked so hard to avoid or to prevent through the success of the project itself, right?
Is that specific to Destination Crenshaw?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Using
yeah, you know, it's
as an example.
I think that we have most of the ingredients to be pretty successful. We have the political clout. The client has the political clout. We've seen sales of property not go through because of concern. So I think the client and us have done most of what we can do. But I think I can't stress enough the engagement of the community and what that has meant to protect not only this project, but the impact on the community. And so only time will tell whether or not that was enough.
Gabrielle, can I break in? I'm sorry. So what did they do to protect the community against gentrification that might come in as a result of this project?
Well, they haven't done it yet, but there are parts of, not necessarily in the 1.3 mile area, but other parts of Crenshaw Boulevard where commercial properties for sale and housing projects proposed, in one case, the community pushed back on the inappropriateness of what was being proposed. And so with a lot of noise, and you know, Black folks can protest and we can make noise and we feel strongly about something. And this community did just that.
Right.
So I think it needs part of that all the time, but I also think we need policy change, and it comes from this group right here. If we don't get out of our lane and try and persuade our clients and our jurisdictions to tear down the barriers to cultural erasure and everything else, then we're going to be having this conversation for a very long time. I'm done.
Any other comments on this particular, on cultural erasure or erasure?
Maybe one more thought
Yeah, Mark.
Because you know, you think about certain things. I think before there's this question about, or in the chat somewhere, about implementing processes, and I think that's interesting. I think there are a few things. One is this Destination Crenshaw changed expectations, And I think that's key. That's not as tangible as, say, rewriting the zoning code or things, but it definitely changed expectations and the view of the values and the culture of the community. And with that, I think had direct impacts on how other projects are received. And I think that leads me to think of other places where, you know, that have design review or things of that nature, where there's just over time become a certain culture of what's acceptable and what isn't. And I think to the extent that we can start thinking about Jedi in the process of building our cities and start building expectations around process, around outcomes that, you know, are just part of the culture of developing city. I think that is something that we really have to think about, and that really includes all of us, including me, to learn and acknowledge that I don't understand everything that I need to understand yet, and I need to do a whole lot more listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we expect that was sort of definitely addresses the comment from Dahlia on the chat, where she states, while it seems imperative to make community involvement code, there's still the challenge of making Jedi part of the larger culture within architecture and the community. So I think to some degree, Martin, you addressed, you're touching on that. We are at 7:35, a little bit past our schedule here. I was wondering if there are any closing questions or comments. Mario, you've just popped up on my screen. Never mind, Mario. Okay. And you're muted too, which is a, I mean, I could talk about this project forever, not only from the standpoint of what it does for a community and how it begins to sort of address issues specific to the Black community in LA, but just as a piece of urban architecture, that would take another hour or two or three. But what I did appreciate was how you took a piece of, you know, sort of, you know, banal urban infrastructure, which is basically a street system, together now with the introduction of metro, and created a beautiful public space. That is a model that can be taken across the city, and LA in particular, where we have so many instances that look just like Crenshaw. It seems like something we should set out to do, and it was commendable. I think, Gabrielle, this project really reaches so many different, you know, does so many different things well, that you should take it out on the road and say, look at what we can do. Not only are we addressing the community, but we're just addressing urban space. And in a way, it's sort of an outdoor, it's both a museum and a gallery, right? It sets up a framework for constantly evolving and changing pieces. You know, both, some will be permanent, surfaces underneath, on the side. You know, there's, you know, a museum becomes a ramp, right? Pocket parks become, you know, planes that have art pieces and points that are sculpture, and all sort of create and tell this story. So wouldn't it be great if we could do that across the city and in other places? So from that perspective, I think it's a fantastic project, and I'm really grateful to Gabrielle and the Perkins Will team, and Joshua, and also Jedi and SoCal Noma, who are co-sponsors. Really grateful for them for working together with the Urban Design Committee, Diane in particular, in putting this thing together.